I've been talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright.
Hi, welcome along to another one of Steve Wraith's True Crime podcast. And it's not very often that you get somebody with a footballer surname on. We've got Holly Daglish on a football show. Regular viewers of the channel will remember Holly has been on News of the World. I'm looking forward to getting her back on there at some point as well. But she's got a fantastic story to tell and a very interesting one. I'm going to do an abridged version. You might have seen Holly appear on quite a few other podcasts talking about her life in the prison system and not as a prisoner, I hasten to add, Holly.
Yeah, please. Just clarify that.
So, your ambitions as a child, when you're at school, what did you want to be?
Well, originally, I wanted to be a marine biologist because I was obsessed with sharks. And then I watched Silence of the Lambs and I decided that I'd wanted to join the FBI. So I actually looked into going to a university in America so I could, train there and hopefully get into the FBI. Very stupid of me. And then what happened then? Yeah, so I did a degree in psychology and it was like I wanted to go into the psychology field. I was going to do a master's, all the rest of it. And then I started thinking about the police. And then just one day my dad said, have you thought the prison service psychology degree, would sort of work with what I was doing? And my plan was to start as a prison officer and then move over to psychology. But prison officers got paid way more than the psychologists. So I got sucked in. And once you're sucked in, you never get out. So
every time I try to get out, they pull me back in. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about the training, because obviously we see we see programs on TV now about people going into the service, and we see more about inmates, I've got to be honest, than prison officers themselves.
Yeah.
And I've interviewed a couple of former prison officers on this channel as well. And obviously work a lot with Lee, who's been on both sides of the bars. But from your perspective, as a female, what was it like going into a heavily populated male environment?
Intimidating. It was difficult because you have to remember I was 21, fresh out of university. I had some life experience, but I'd never had a fight, never really had an argument with anyone, never sort of associated with anyone that committed crime or took drugs or anything like that. So I have to say, the prisoners were not the problem. Overall, they were very, very respectful. People think that women shouldn't work in a male jail, and I got on with the prisoners. We had a really good relationship. But the staff, I was 21, I was keen, I was eager, but the staff looked down on me, really. So I had more of a problem with them. They thought I would not be capable of handling myself physically. I think they just thought I was this stupid little girl who didn't know what she was doing. And there was, and I've said this before, and I've been absolutely slated online for saying this, but the misogyny and the harassment was quite significant. So I was not afraid of the prisoners. It was more the intimidation and being made to feel uncomfortable by the male staff. And obviously, being brand new, you don't have a voice. You don't stick up for yourself. It's the sort of attitude was put up and shut up, and you don't grasp, basically. So yeah, I had to deal with that, and I soon found my feet and I soon found my voice, because you have to, because otherwise you're gonna just, I don't know,
you sink or swim.
Exactly. And I swam and I went through a lot and I experienced a lot. But it made me the person that I became. All those experiences that I went through just spurred me on. I used them as a sort of stepping stone to think, I can do better, I can become better, I can change it from the inside. So that's why I started to go through promotion, because I thought it would make a difference. So yeah, very quickly starting in the service, I thought I want to go further.
So going back a little bit, the prison officer side of things, how long does the training take, Holly?
Well, the initial training was 12 weeks. Now, just to clarify, they've completely overhauled the training now. So it's completely different to what I did. So it was a 12-week training, and it was residential. So you would be there Monday to Friday, staying over, and then you would go home at the weekend. And it was a place called Newbold Revel College, and it's a very, very posh type setting, and we were in dorm type conditions. I'm going to be straight with you here. It was a bit of a boozy time. So quite often we would be out socializing, drinking, coming in at 2:00 in the morning, and then having to do a health and safety class or a CPR class, or so they always took us for either a run in the morning. We had to do marching. We had to do a lot of physical stuff to get our fitness up. We did a lot of stuff on interactions, how to manage prisoners, all the paperwork. So the paperwork in the prison service is just off the scale. So we spent a lot of time learning about paperwork. There was something like 52 prison rules that prisoners have to abide by. So we had to learn all of those. I found it interesting. I found it really, apart from the health and safety, which was boring as shit. But yeah, it was good. And what it did when you're in a residential situation with all your colleagues, it's the teamwork. You start to bond with people. You sort of learn to watch each other's back. And then we did obviously control and restraint training, and I loved that. All the shields, the riot stuff, the fighting, that was sort of my favorite bit.
But nothing can prepare you for the actual moment that you step inside a prison and onto the landings. And I've got to say, it's very similar with being a doorman. I mean, in a lot of ways, because you have to go through a period of training, and I can say probably the same about the police or the army, I guess. But anything in that kind of area where you're dealing with potentially life-threatening situations, that has to be said. Or people who could cause you harm or intend to cause you harm. You only know when you get onto that, your first day's shift on that landing, whether you can cope with it or not, because it takes a certain type of person to be able to do that.
Yeah, because the training was so fun, and, we were told about violent prisoners. We did sort of role plays and things like that. But I have to say, my first shift, it was at Style Prison. My first shift, I was absolutely shitting myself. And I'm not afraid to admit that. It was because the training was very much focused on male prisons. So female prisons are just complete. It's like a world away from what male prisons are like. And yeah, I have to say, I was terrified. I was really, really scared. And it was fine. The shift was absolutely fine. But I knew at some point I was going to have a fight. And that was what I was worried about. And once I got my first fight under my belt, I know that sounds really, really weird, but once I got my first fight under my belt, I started to get a bit more confident. you do always have that fear of being assaulted. I was kind of like, not the face or the teeth, you know what I mean? I can't take a punch. But fortunately, you always have staff around. You always have people watching your back. You know, you might be on your own with someone, but you know, staff will respond within seconds, minutes, and then the situation. So when we do control and restraint, there's always 3 officers. So we use the sort of the control and restraint is very much sort of based on jiu-jitsu type holds, and things like that. So yeah, I soon found my feet, if you know what I mean. But I went from style then to a male prison. I went to Wormwood Scrubs and Brixton after that, and that was absolutely terrifying.
Tell us about your first fight before we move on to those two. Then, what was your first fight?
Well, it was more so. Women tend to fight more with other women. There's always some sort of drama, and I'm not stereotyping women here, but there is always some sort of drama going on. It's just horrendous. They argue back all the time. So I remember 2 women started fighting, and you just have to get in between them. That's it. You just have to, you know, you have to separate them. You're not allowed to stand there and let them beat the shit out of each other. You've got to get stuck in. So I'm literally between these 2 women that are, and hair pulling. They were really, women pull hair, men don't. Women pull hair, and there's like literally clumps of hair coming out, and I'm just like hands out trying to stop. And it was staff, and the staff came eventually and helped me pull them apart. But it's fighting in between 2 very, very angry women is not a good place to be. But yeah, got it under my belt. The adrenaline was going. And then I thought, right, okay, that's done. You know, I can do it. I can do it again. So I was it sounds weird. I was happy. It was the one thing that I was really scared about fighting, and I got through it. But I tell you what, women, wow. If you think men can fight, women are just, they don't stop. So men will fight, you'll get in between them, and generally it's like a couple of punches and it's done, it's over. Women do not stop. They do not stop.
So from style to Wormwood Scrubs and Brixton, I mean, was that an enforced move? Was that a move that you instigated yourself?
No. So what happens is when a prison, because just to sort of give you the backstory, there was a massive recruitment because Risley Prison, which held women on remand, was shut in. So they built a new wing at Style. So they recruited about 25 of us, but the wing wasn't ready to be open. So the prison was overstaffed. So what happens is when a prison's overstaffed and another prison is understaffed, you can volunteer to go. You're not made to, but you back in the days, it was really lucrative. You know, you made a lot of money because you got like extra pay. You got, you know, I think at the time it was 25 quid a night. And then on top of that, we were getting traveling and all our extras. And my family were down south. My boyfriend was down south. So it just really worked out well for me. And I had no idea what I was letting myself in for. I just thought, oh, this will be great. There was a load of us going down. So I thought, brilliant, loads of mates to go. It's going to be like training again. It's fab. They sent me to Wormwood Scrubs on my own and then sent about 12 people to Brixton. I was just like, just me going to Wormwood Scrubs. And the Scrubs had, just excuse me, I'm going to get a quick drink. The Scrubs had an absolutely appalling reputation. A load of staff, the reason I went there, a load of staff had just been sacked for prisoner brutality, and officers were jailed. because they'd been battering prisoners on the segregation unit. So there was a mass dismissal of staff. And I can only describe my first day. So I went in, and I'm this little bouncy, excited little puppy, had my hair piled up on my head, had a bit of makeup on, was, ready to go. Not one person spoke to me. Not one person, until I was put on a wing. And then I got put on the wing, and the principal officer, who's like highest uniform rank, basically said, I can't believe they've sent you to us. Sit in the office, you can make my tea all day, that's your job. So I was literally told to stay in the office. And then then he said, if there's an alarm bell, which means obviously some incidents going on, he said, just lock yourself in my office. Because I was the only woman. I wasn't really allowed out on the landings until about a week later. So yeah, it was pretty harsh. No one spoke to me. Prisoners spoke to me because they were really interested. They were like, are you from Style? What's that like? What are the women like? They were really sort of inquisitive, and the staff just ignored me. And then I got bollocked because I was talking to prisoners, and I was told that I was flirting with them. I'm like, what? I'm just talking to them, because obviously the staff didn't interact with them, and I'm a chatty person, and that was what we were told to do at college. We were told to speak to them. It's called dynamic security. You find things out. You find out who's who and what's going on and who's doing what. But yeah, I got dragged in and told that I was flirting, and I was just like, it's just my natural way of being. I'm just chatty, happy, bouncy, or I was then. That soon changed. But I thought, I can't spend a 12-hour shift not talking to anyone. I was at Wormwood Scrubs. They would, and probably quite a few people have probably heard this story. They would put porn films on in the staff room at lunchtime. Obviously, it made me extremely uncomfortable. So I would go sit at the end of the landing, which was absolutely freezing, and just eat my packed lunch and read a book or something. So yeah, there was always staff swapping porn DVDs and videos and things like that. And it was just like, and I'm thinking, these are in charge of prisoners. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it was just wrong. It was just completely wrong. But I only did, I think, 4 weeks there. And then they said, oh, you can go to Brixton now. And I was like, yes. And that was a completely different experience. It was really weird. I mean, both prisons had a bad reputation, but Brixton, they were dead friendly. We were welcomed with open arms, really. So there was about 10 of us from Style that went down, and it was fab. We stayed in the hotel. We used to eat out at night. They generally tended to put us together working places, so it was good to have friends around. But yeah, there was some experiences there as well, shall we say. We worked on the psychiatric unit quite a lot, so that was like Silence of the Lambs. So imagine, I don't know.
Perfect for you after your original.
Exactly.
Idea.
So I was like chuffed to bits, fascinating. So you can imagine the corridor in Silence of the Lambs. It was a bit brighter, but there were cells on either side, and they had hatches that they could open so that they could like stick the heads out and things like that. But they could also throw things out. So it was like running the gauntlet. When you went down this corridor, it was like, maybe you'd get some spit, maybe it wasn't like, I don't know if you've seen the film, it wasn't like multiple MIGs or anything like that.
Yeah.
But you'd get the abuse, you'd get things thrown out of the out of the hatch and things like that. but it was quite a big unit. And that was that when I saw my first really serious incident of self-harm on that psychiatric unit. So when a prisoner is at real risk of suicide, they put a perspex door instead of a cell door, and it's literally so a member of staff can sit outside and observe them 24 hours a day. But these prisoners are really sneaky, so God knows how they do things, or hide things when you're being watched 24 hours a day. Anyway, so there was this one guy, and he was being observed 24 hours a day, perspex door. And I think I walked past and just nipped to the office or something, and the cell floor was blue and the walls were cream. And I remember walking back, because I've never seen blood. I've never seen anyone self-harm. It's just, completely alien to, well, it'd be completely alien to anyone. And I walked back and I actually thought the works department had gone in and repainted the cell, because the cell floor was red, and it just didn't register in my mind. And then I noted the splashes of blood up the wall, and then the staff came in and it opened up an artery, and the amount of blood, the arterial spray, everything, I didn't get involved. I think I went into shock, but I could smell the blood, and that never leaves you. And it's, unless you've actually been in that situation, it smells coppery. It's just, there's something, people say, oh, once you've smelled a dead body, you never forget it, or it sticks in your mind. That's the same with blood, and it was a huge amount of blood that he had lost. But yeah, I couldn't respond to that. I definitely went into shock. But to the other staff, they were used to it. They just was like, went in, dealt with it. Nurses patched him up. They were able to stitch him up and do what they needed to do. But yeah, made me quite sick, because I've got a bit of an aversion to bodily fluids. And believe me, in the prison service, you come across every bodily fluid that you can think of. So on the one hand, it was really interesting, and I got to, sometimes sit in with the psychiatrist, because you had to stay, if the prisoner was volatile, you'd have to attend the meetings with them. And I found that really fascinating, obviously background in psychology, and it gave me a lot of knowledge. It gave me a lot of sort of mental health experience, which sort of really helped for the rest of my service. But yeah, it was quite a funny place. The upper floors were like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it was generally a crazy place to work. But I enjoyed it. Like I say, I'm really interested in people's psyche and behavior and stuff like that. And another thing that it taught me is how prisoners fake mental illness as well. So I picked up lots of tips from the psychiatrists, in terms like when they hear voices, and because they think they get treated better on the healthcare unit, or it might help, for example, with their court case. So if you're deemed mad, obviously, or you might get to a hospital. So yeah, really fascinating. Saw a lot of fights, saw a lot of self-harm. But it started to toughen. That was when I started to toughen up, and I started to, really find my feet and hit the ground running. And the staff were great. I was working with my friends, and yeah, it was good. It was a good experience.
The self-harm situation is something which you hear a lot about. Protests as well. I mean, the prisoners do tend to protest in a rather extraordinary way. Dirty protests. I'm sure you've seen a lot of those in your time.
Yeah. So, like I said, I don't do bodily fluids. However, you get very, very used to it very quickly. So I'll give you a couple of incidents. One woman came in style, clearly unwell from a psychiatric perspective. Now, bearing in mind, in prison, unlike psychiatric hospitals, we cannot enforce treatment, so they can refuse to take their medication. We can't touch them, can't do anything. We can't, forcibly make them take a tablet or give them a tranquilizer injection, nothing. So this woman came in, and I would say she was in about her 40s, 50s. And the minute she came in, she started smearing shit everywhere. And I mean, but it wasn't a protest. She'd just gone. Her head had just gone. She covered her whole body, head to toe, in her own shit. The walls were covered in it. The floor was covered in it. Obviously, you have to feed people every day and give them drinks. So staff would be having to put almost like NBC suits on, literally crack the door open and shove the food through. And she wasn't eating. So God knows where this amount of shit was coming from. So we were like, people think that prison officers have the power when it comes to mental health. We don't. It's the psychiatrists and the mental health team. However, she was so bad. So, it was in her hair as well, all in her hair. So the questions were asked, can we forcibly move her out of the cell and get her in the bath and in the meantime, clear the room? So the uppers, the highest, the management said, no, we can't. It's an enforced treatment. And we're like, she needs to get in the bath. She needs to be scrubbed from head to toe. So it took about a week, and I think we had to go through the Home Office to get permission, and like NHS England to physically remove her from the cell into the bath. And that was a dickhead here volunteered for it, not knowing what the job was. And yeah, we had to fight it, covered in shit. Bearing in mind, we've got riot gear on, uniform underneath our riot gear. We've got like NBC suits on, we've got face masks on, and we've got helmets on. And it was hot. The smell of shit was absolutely overwhelming. They'd put the bath on and the bath was steaming, and we were in a confined space, and the smell, I can't describe it. And I literally thought I was going to vomit into my right helmet. So that was that one, and we did manage, but she literally had to be scrubbed. This is going to sound awful, with a green scrubbing pad. That's how caked on it was. A nurse did that. We didn't do that. Only a nurse was allowed to do it. But she was so out of it, I don't even think she knew what was going on. We had another one at Liverpool. I always remember this one. So he was an illegal immigrant and had committed a crime, got sent to prison. Now, one of the popular things that illegal immigrants used to do is feign mental illness, feign madness, because if you're mad, you go to hospital and it sort of delays or prevents you being deported. So we would quite often see the people, these illegal immigrants, do this kind of behavior. So there was this one guy, I think he was from like Syria or something like that. And he was down the segregation unit because he'd started a dirty protest on the wing. So he got moved to the segregation unit and he started a dirty protest there. But get this, he didn't move, he sat cross-legged with a turd on his head for about 3 days. Right? And we used to check him and he'd just be sat there cross-legged with this turd on his head. And then what he used to do is roll up little balls of shit like Maltesers and flick them underneath the door. So you'd have like piss coming out the door because he'd piss out the door, and then like little Maltesers like flying out as well as the turd on his head. So that was quite fun, but you started to get used to it. And so when I was a duty governor, and that means you're in charge for the day operationally for sort of incidents and anything that needs dealing with for the day. We had a dirty protest and I had an egg sandwich in my trench coat and hadn't eaten. You'd sometimes go 14 hours without having a wee, because you'd just be going from instant to instant to instant. You wouldn't have a wee, you'd have nothing to eat. It was just on the go 12, 14 hours a day. And we had this dirty protest. And by this time I got so used to it. And I was desperate. And I started eating this egg sandwich in front of the cell with the dirty protest going on. And staff were like, how the hell can you eat with this going on? I was like, I got to the point where I was like, I don't care. I'd rather smell egg than smell that. So yeah, it was quite common, but staff, and it was awful for staff, don't get me wrong. It wasn't pleasant dealing with it, but they used to get £12 extra per shift, which at the time was, quite significant. So,
yeah,
if you had my maths is rubbish, I think it's 60. If you had 5 days of prisoner on dirty protest, that's an extra £60. Some of them would be on it for week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So although it was grim to deal with, you did get paid extra. So
always a bright side.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess when you do these podcasts, you're always going to get asked if you've come across any, notorious inmates. And listening to one of your podcasts, as I do before I interview a guest on the show, I heard you refer to Tracy Andrews, who I remembered very, very clearly.
Me
for those
too.
of you who don't know who Tracy Andrews is, this is the lady here. I use the word lady,
loosely.
Very loosely, yes. But she's a road rage killer. She killed her boyfriend in 1996, and she's a free woman now. And remarried, now to a guy who she met many, many years ago in a bar. I think he was a bouncer. But Tracy Andrews, tell us a little bit about your encounter with Miss Andrews.
So I can't remember why she was coming to Style. I don't know whether it was a progression move or because we had a lifer unit. I don't know if it was a progression move or something we called accumulated visits, where you can, if you've got family like miles away, you can save up your visits and you can have like, say, 5 visits in a week. So we went into the morning briefing and we were told Tracy Andrews was here. Now, we worked on a remand wing, and the sort of general rule of thumb is that you do not put lifers with prisoners on remand. But she was in. So lifers get a lot better treatment, let's say. So they will get a single cell instead of a double cell. They're allowed a lot more sort of things, like they can have their own duvet. They can order, a lot more things on the canteen. They're just allowed more privileges because basically they're there for life. So they're even allowed canaries. That's how bizarre it is. Anyway, so we were in the morning briefing and we were told that Tracy Andrews was there. Now, some staff I think were born in 1996 who didn't really know, but I knew I had followed the story it probably like self inside out. I was, you know, I wouldn't say obsessed with it, but I was just fascinated about her psychology and, you know, everything that had gone on. So she was on my landing. And I wouldn't say I was scared, but when you know that someone like that has such an explosive temper, you know, you start to get a little bit worried. She hadn't come with the best reputation. There was issues at other prisons and stuff like that, issues with male staff. So she was an unknown, basically. So went on my wing, worked my way around, unlocking all the cells, and I got to her cell, and I thought, I'll introduce myself. I'll say, you know, don't worry, you won't be here long. I know these aren't great conditions for you, etc., etc. So I walked in the cell, and she was stood there, and all I can say is, you know, when they say you can see the soul through the eyes, she had dead eyes, and I mean dead. And I did introduce myself, did other things that I you know, said I would, you know, do. And she just completely ignored me, walked straight past, didn't say a word, didn't speak to any other prisoner, didn't speak to staff. She was cold, stoic. I mean, she's later come out and said that the reason she was like she was is because she was abused as a child, etc., etc. But I think I'm pretty good at sussing out psychopaths, and she just came across as a psychopath to me. It was her eyes that was scary. That was the scariest part, looking into the eyes and seeing nothing. I never saw her smile. I never saw her interact with anyone. Yeah, no staff, no prisoners would she wouldn't speak to them. And then she left after a week, but she did have a bad reputation. She had allegedly said that she was going to try and get pregnant by a male member of staff, so that she could move to a mother and baby unit, which would be more pleasant. Mother and baby units are very, very nice. So that was the rumour, that she had said that she was going to try and get pregnant by a male officer. Now, that might have been the reason that she was moved to Style, you know, because she was a threat to make, you know, she obviously saw herself as a bit of a, I don't know, seductive, you know, I can't think of the word for it, but she obviously thought she was yeah,
a bit of a catch. Somebody who could manipulate,
manipulate someone into it. She looked exactly like the photos. You know the ones that you've just shown.
Yeah,
she looked. I mean, obviously she's going to look the same, but I was expecting a lot of people when they come in will change their appearance, cut their hair, dye it, do something so that they're not recognizable to other prisoners. But she looked exactly the same, and it was just so weird. It was just so odd. That was the first person that I'd seen, the first high profile prisoner that I'd seen or interacted with, albeit that I interacted with her and she didn't speak to me. But yeah, fascinating. Again, I'm sort of really interested in the psyche of these people. I wanted to ask her loads of questions, but those eyes just put me straight off. I thought, I don't fancy getting stabbed, so I'll leave her be.
Any other high profile prisoners that you came across, either as a prison officer or as
a governor? So there's two. So there's two main ones. I don't know if you know about Dale Cregan.
Yes, yep. Horrendous story, yep.
Horrendous story. So just give a quick synopsis of what he did. He was in a Manchester gang. There was a gang war that was ongoing at the time. he went into a pub and shot this guy, and who was part of a rival gang. He then later on went to this guy's dad's house, shot him, I think about 10 times, and then bombed the house with hand grenades. So he's committed 2 murders. There you go. Committed 2 murders within the space of about 2 weeks. Then he went on the run, and basically Greater Manchester Police were kicking down every door, going through every associate, trying to find him. And on this one particular day, he'd been holed up in a house on his own, a sort of empty house, and he rang 999 and he said that the house was being burgled, and 2 young female police officers arrived, and this is horrendous, he shot them and again used hand grenades, and the injuries to these women were horrific. One died at the scene, one made it to hospital and then died at hospital. So after that, as you can imagine, it's unheard of in England, you know. You do get the odd police officer that's killed, but this was 2 female police officers that had been absolutely brutally murdered just doing their job. So I'm not sure how long it was, but he handed himself in. He just walked into a police station and said, I'm Dale Cregan, and I'm the one basically that killed those women. So the police were all over it, obviously. But the weird thing is that he'd admitted to killing the women, but not the 2 gang guys. My personal view is that he was now a target, and he was gonna get shot. And I think he thought if he was in prison, he would be safe. So he came in as a high risk catet. Because of his gang, because of the crime, and because of his gang connections, and about the sort of his ability possibly to escape because he's associated with people with lots of money. So at the time, I was doing a job where I oversaw people that were high risk of suicide, self-harm, violence. So I got called in by the big bosses and they said, you're his case manager. That's what you call it. So you oversee all the sort of care package that's put together. You interact with the prisoner. As a governor, your name has to go on the paperwork, because you need that authority to deal with him. I think it's basically if something goes wrong, it would have been my neck on the block. So he arrived handcuffed, with his black eye still, and we sat in this room. There was a long table, and we sat in this room. Now, my job isn't to punish him in any way. My job is to keep him safe until he gets to court. That's it. Making sure that he doesn't hurt himself and he doesn't hurt anyone else. So we sat opposite this sort of long table, and I started to ask him questions, and I was like, how are you feeling? He's like, I'm fine. I said, any thoughts of suicide or self-harm? No, not at all. Anything worrying you? Have you got any concerns about coming into prison? No. Is there anything you need? Is there anything we can do for you? And he said, well, I would like to contact my girlfriend because they have threatened to rape my son. So I just need to give her a call. But the way he said it was just like, I mean, he wasn't horrible. He wasn't being disrespectful or anything like that. He was actually, relatively pleasant to deal with. And I'm sat facing this man and I'm thinking, you've killed 4 people. 4 people in a horrendous way. And I'm now sat opposite you, and I've got to manage you every day. I've got to see you. I've got to check on you. I've got to make sure he stays alive. I've got to make sure that there's no intelligence that suggests that he's going to be hurt by gang members in the prison. So the weight of responsibility on my shoulders was quite significant. But so what happened was, so when he came in, he was obviously a steroid user. So he was quite buff. He was quite, you could see the muscles through the t-shirt. He was, fit, not fit as in fantasy ball fit, but his black eye was just so intimidating. It was awful. Anyway, cutting a long story short, he had to be psychiatrically evaluated. His defense was obviously going to try and go down this sort of insanity route, even though we knew he was a psychopath. Just because you're a psychopath doesn't mean you're going to get a hospital, order. So they sent him to Ashworth High Security Hospital, and he came back. I can't remember how long he was there, and they'd obviously pumped him full of antipsychotic medication. He wasn't psychotic, or in my opinion, he wasn't psychotic. They pumped him full of medication. Eventually decided that he wasn't mad, like we knew all along. He was just bad. And he came back, and he'd must have put on about 4 or 5 stone, and he was like an absolute zombie. So it was like, it must have been like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was almost like he'd been given a lobotomy. And at that point, you just realised he wasn't, I don't know, it's really difficult to explain, but it was just such a change in personality, such a change in, it's just like walking around like this, head down, not really interacting with people. So yeah, it was quite weird. But when he used to go to court, oh my God, they used to go, I can't remember what court he went to, but I think they used to travel down the East Lancashire Road, which is like a big road near me between Manchester and Liverpool. And he'd travel in what we call a Category A van, but he would have police on motorbikes, armed police, snipers at the court, snipers on the roof at the court, armed police. Even at the prison, as he was coming out, there would be like 10 armed police surrounding the van as he came out. He was considered that dangerous. But in prison, he was absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. Didn't get into any bother, didn't create any issues, didn't have any fights. He was just a stone cold psychopath. The weird thing is, this is going to sound really, really weird. I actually felt sorry for him, when he came back from hospital, because when you take psychiatric meds and you're not mad, it's going to change you. It's going to change your brain. And it, it sounds awful to say felt sorry for him, but, to go for it was like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was horrible. But yeah, so eventually he got a whole life sentence, which is quite unusual, because if you think of the prison population of about, say just 90,000, there's an average, about 65 people in the whole population do a whole life sentence, and he got a whole life sentence, quite rightly. But yeah, very, very easy to deal with, very, very easy to deal with. Just bizarre. Oh yeah, and that's another thing. So when he was going to court, his solicitors requested that he go to Manchester Eye Hospital and have his black eye removed and a more like realistic eye replaced, because what he was bothered about was the jury seeing it as a really intimidating factor about him. So they wanted this new false eye, because you can get really realistic ones now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the prison was just like, you can fuck off. We are not traveling, because every time he travelled, he had to have police with him, armed police. Cost a fortune, obviously. And we were just like, no way are we taking him to the hospital. So we had to go to court with his black eye. And all the evidence was there, you know. It was quite clear, but Manchester police kicked down every door of anyone that had any association with him. And this is why, when he went and handed himself in, he said, "You harassed my family, now I've harassed yours." So he had intended, it was premeditated that he would kill police officers. And he said, "The only thing I regret is that they were female." That was it. That was it.
Interesting stuff, that. Okay, so you said there was another one. Who was the other notorious prisoner? I'm conscious of the phone. We've got about 15 minutes left on the podcast.
I know. I could chat forever, me. So
you could, yeah, fantastic.
There was a guy called Mark Bridger. So people may or may not remember him. It's sort of, I live in the northwest, not far from North Wales, but it did go nationwide, you know, because it was such a horrendous crime. So just to give the backstory, there was a girl and her family who lived in a town called Machynlleth. Very nice town. I've been there myself. They lived on an estate, and they had a daughter called April, who was 5 years old. She had cerebral palsy as well, so she was smaller than the other kids. She had issues walking, so she had a pink bike, and she loved this pink bike because it gave her the freedom. She could play with all the friends on the estate, you know, instead, because she was sort of limited with her movement. This bike gave her the freedom to sort of get around, which I think is lovely. So one night she has to play out. Her mum was like, "Okay, but I want you back for 7." But there was a group of other kids as well. It's a safe area. You wouldn't think anything would go on. So she didn't come home at the right time. So obviously they go out looking for it. They find a pink bike. Yeah, I can't even look at that man. I saw that face every day for 9 months. Anyway, they found a pink bike, and then one of the girls came forward and said a man had taken her and put her in a vehicle, like a 4x4 type vehicle, and she'd climbed in the driver's side. So the assumption was this young girl who turned actually to become a witness, assumed that April knew this guy. Anyway, so all alerts went out as a kidnapping, and they'd found a pink bike, and there was I call him gentleman. No, that's the wrong word. There was a man, a monster, that lived in the same town. He was known. He had 6 children. He was he had been in a relationship with a number of women in the area. He lived in a lovely little cottage, just slightly out of the outside of the village or town. He was known in the area. He had a couple of previous offences, quite, I say minor, but you know, I think he had a domestic assault, a couple of car-related crimes, but nothing to do with children, which is very, very bizarre. Anyway, soon after, this girl had been abducted, and they were treating it as an abduction because that's all the information they had. Mark Bridger took his car into the garage. Now, the police had already released the information that they believed that the car was a right-hand drive. So she got in the driver's side because it was right-hand drive. So the left side was the passenger side. So the police had released this information, and Mark Bridger had taken his car to a garage, and it was a right-handed drive. So they reported that, and it's quite a damning piece of evidence. You know, it's not many people have right-handed drives, so they had enough to take him in for interviewing. He's a horrible man. However, when you meet him, and I met him, so similar to Dale Cregan, I was his case manager, but he was considered a really high risk of suicide. And I was basically told that I would lose my job if he killed himself, because he had to get to court. So our main objective was to get into court so that justice could be served. So eventually enough evidence was gathered for him to come to prison. So he concocted a story. So this is bad. So he claims that he hit April on her bike. He was pissed out of his head, and he hit April with his bike. Hit her bike, and panicked because she was unconscious. So he put her in his car unconscious, and then because he was so drunk, he doesn't remember where he put her. Total fabrication, total lie. But he stuck to that like glue. That was his sort of mantra. And it's quite a simple lie. And so simple lies are easy to sort of maintain. There was no evidence of damage to April's bike. There was no evidence of any remains of the bike on his 4x4. But the first week he came in, so I interviewed him every day, because again, I talk about the authority side of things, putting names on paperwork, stuff like that. You know, they're high level sort of risk assessment decisions that you have to make. First day came in, and we were like, what a nice guy. And we were fooled. He was articulate, intelligent, engaging, appeared to show genuine remorse, said he was devastated that he couldn't remember where he'd put April. And for a couple of days, I remember myself and a couple of the psychiatric nurses saying, I wonder if he's right. You know, he seems so normal. And I mean, so nothing like Dale Cregan, nothing like Tracy Andrews. He was normal, and he would engage with us. He would cry. We now realise that when he started, you know, the crying got a bit too much, and then we realised that there were absolutely no tears coming out of his eyes whatsoever.
Doing a Matt Hancock, that's called, I think.
Is it? Or doing an Amber Heard?
Yeah.
You know, that exactly that kind of thing. So very, very dramatic. He'd come out of his cell in the morning and he'd say, April's been to me in a dream, trying to tell me where she's buried. And we're like, Rrr. And then he's like trying to draw maps in his prison, in his cell. And I just wanted to rip his throat out, because we knew. We received information from his solicitors, because he was so high risk of suicide. We said, you know, if he goes on a visit and suddenly gets confronted with a big piece of evidence that's going to increase his risk, we have to manage that. So we knew that bones and blood had been found in his house way before anyone else. So the evidence was overwhelming that he was guilty, but he still stuck to his mantra that he'd knocked her over and couldn't remember. The heartbreaking thing for me was that her family never found a body to bury. Never.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
And he never gave it up. Never gave it up. Still sticks to his mantra even now. I think that affected me. One of the, and I've said this quite a few times, one of the main pieces of evidence that came out later in court. So bearing in mind, he said that he had taken her unconscious into his car. When the police checked his car, there were little handprints on the inside of the window. And that just broke my heart. Sorry, I'm just moving around. That absolutely broke my heart, because she was trying to get out.
Jesus.
And as a mum, I think my son was 3 at the time. I would pretty much say I was traumatized by that, as was the rest of the team.
I'm traumatized listening to you, Holly.
Yeah, as you know, I was obviously in charge of the team, and we had a bunch of mental health workers, psychologists, and specially trained staff, prison staff, and I was sort of overseeing all of that. And I remember us just going into the office and sobbing. And I couldn't, in terms of professionalism or whatever, I didn't give a shit. I was just like, I can't cope. It was the fact that it was the not finding the body, not disclosing, saying shit like she's coming to me in a dream. What? You're torturing her family. And that hurt me. The handprints and the fact that her family never got any justice or had the dignity, humanity to bury their daughter. They do documentaries now. I've seen a couple. The heartbreak is obviously clearly still there. But it was very hard. 9 months I dealt with that guy. 9 months. And people say, oh, you leave your troubles at work, and when you get home, it's absolutely fine. It wasn't. It really affected me. I was drinking quite a lot at the time, just trying to blank things out. I hated him. There's no other prisoner that's has evoked such a strong feeling in me. But yeah, it's one of the cases that just absolutely haunts me even now.
Thanks for sharing that. I know it must be tough to talk about that. Look, we knew we would never cover everything in your life on the podcast. I'm gonna, and you did go on to be, to get promotion and move up the ladder and eventually become governor of a prison.
I wasn't fully in charge of the prison, but you would quite often do duty governors, which meant you run the prison.
Which is an amazing achievement for anyone, to work their way up a ladder, Holly. It shows the determination, but it also shows how good you were at your job.
I like to think so, and I worked hard. I didn't get anything handed to me. I didn't get any special favors. Nothing like that. It was just solid. And I got knocked back. I failed quite a lot of my promotion exams several times. And I just kept coming back and fighting for it, working my ass off at work. I got to where I got to through probably, I wouldn't say bullshit, but
bloody mindedness. Maybe there's a bit of bloody mindedness in there, but just a determination, Holly, and it's what's within you, and the fact that you went into that male environment and were, put into those situations, guys watching porn on a wing, intimidating, people saying, who the hell are you? And you fought your way through shark infested water, I'm going to call it, because of your love for sharks. But ultimately, you've come out of the other side of it. And I mean, I've listened to your podcast with other people, and it's just a fascinating life story. I'm going to ask you $1 million question here, which there's probably no answer to, but you'll have your answer to it. And that is, does prison work?
The overwhelming thought is no. Our prison system is underfunded, under-resourced. I would say quite archaic in its approach. They have privatized a lot of the rehabilitation companies, everything is money driven, budgets are cut, and we do have revolving door prisoners that are just, you do have the odd person that has one sentence and, doesn't come back and it's done its job. But even the conditions that prisoners live in, and the public think that they have PlayStations and they have, and they do have like TVs and they do have like the odd bit of privilege, but the cells are disgusting. They're locked in a lot of the time. The jobs that they get given are we call noddy jobs, just repetitive, jobs that with absolutely no value. The education isn't equipped well enough. And I mean, we always look at, I've always been interested in like the Norwegian sort of route, the sort of Dutch route is very, very focused on rehabilitation. The conditions in prison are very, very different. I mean, they might have a different type of prisoner. There are some that do definitely need to be incarcerated and kept there. But in terms of rehabilitation, I would say no, it doesn't work at all. The system, I think, and the people in the prison service, the higher up would disagree, but I think the prison service is broken. And because it's not a vote winner, so if the government says, we're going to give X million pounds to build new prisons and this, that, and the other, and, invest in rehabilitation, you've got people that can't eat or heat. That's not going to come, it's not a vote winner, is it? People don't give a shit about it's like you're behind the walls, outside, out of mind kind of thing. So yeah, I would say overall, I would say no.
Holly Daglish, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad we managed to get this on. Thank you so much for doing that. And I'm looking forward to getting you back onto News of the World at some point to talk about what is in the news. But, we'll post any links that you have, your socials, etc., down below. Yeah. You're currently writing a book as well, which I think will be a fascinating insight. I think you could probably write more than one book, Holly. I've got to be perfectly honest.
I know. Do you know what? I've got to... So I've sort of organised it into chapters and things like that. Yeah. And I've already done, so an average novel is about 80 to 90,000 words.
Correct.
And I've done 20,000. I think I've only covered like 5% of my career.
It's mental. Yeah, well, good luck with it. Best of luck with it.
Thank you.
Maybe when the book comes out, we'll get you back on and do a little bit of promo for you and help you out with that as well, which would be great.
That would be lovely. And News of the World, definitely. I've got obsession with Meghan and Harry at the moment.
Oh, great.
Cost of living crisis, you name it, I'm there.
Well, Holly, thanks very much. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely Christmas, you and your gorgeous family.
You too. Take care.
Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Good to speak to you. Take care.
A big thanks to all our sponsors. First off, Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Garden of Eden Dispensary, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists. You can find them at thegohd.com. And thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces. They are handmade in Cumbria, and you can find more information out on their website, mrvickies.co.uk. And if you want to order any, email info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Big thanks to Blowhole Brewery, a new beer made on Tyneside. The cans are all designed in the colours of Newcastle United strips from days gone by. Black and white there, the purple and blue, and the good old-fashioned blue from the Entertainers' days. But get more information on the Blowhole Brewery range, such as Geordie Juice, from blowholebrewery.co.uk. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the technical side of things and video side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who do our website, NUFCmatters.com. If you want to subscribe to the show, then all you need to do is click the subscribe button below. You can also hit the thumb up, which does us a favor by liking the video, and click share to your social media, such as Twitter and Facebook. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes and Spotify and the rest. And if you want to contribute to the show, use the QR code. It takes you straight to the membership pack and you can join the channel. What do you get for your membership pack? You get a scarf, a cup, a pen, and a membership card, and entry into the monthly draw. You can also make a donation by hitting the $ in the chat tonight. We also give you something for free if you subscribe to the show. To get your car sticker, email john@nufcmatters.com and he will post you one out. We also support the food bank on this show. And if you want to make a virtual donation to the food bank, then go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and make a donation today. On our website, we've got lots of t-shirts, cups, pens, you name it, memorabilia if you want to buy it and support the show. For Christmas, we have the Bruno Christmas jumper, which is selling rather well. And we'll have the bobble hats, Play Like Almiron, Bruno's Magic, and Bruno's 39 and Joe Linton's J7. Get yourself to nufcmatters.com to buy them today. If you want to buy people a ticket for one of our events next year, we've got an evening with Steve Howie, which is Friday the 24th of February at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets are £50 from nufcmatters.com or newcastlelegends.com. And you can also buy them on voucher before Christmas. Get somebody a bargain and a nice Christmas present. Peter Beardsley is on the 10th of February at St. Dom's Catholic Club in Newcastle. Tickets available direct from the venue. And for this one, Friday the 2nd of June next year at the Grand Hotel in Gosforth, 6:30 start. An evening with Rob Lee, Lee Clark and John Beresford. To book tickets, contact Natalie at heelandtour.org.uk or visit their website, heelandtour.org.uk/events. If you're looking for a Christmas present and people like a book, then get yourself NME from the Bender Squad to the Gremlins, or the last remaining copies of Black or White, No Grey Areas, Lee Clark's autobiography, and you can get them from www.badboysbooks.net.